Met an American tourist at a Sydney cafe last week. Barista handed him his flat white and said, "Here's your overpriced dirt water, mate." The American's face went through 5 stages of grief in 3 seconds. He demanded to speak to the manager, pulled out his phone to record evidence of the hostile service, and started citing TripAdvisor's guidelines on acceptable customer interaction standards. The barista just stood there, confused, while the rest of us locals tried not to laugh. Finally, another customer leaned over and said, "Mate, he likes you." The American looked at us like we'd all joined a cult. This wasn't an isolated incident. Australia has one of the world's most unique communication cultures, built on sarcasm, self-deprecation, and what Aussies call taking the piss, a form of friendly mockery that signals acceptance and warmth. Meanwhile, American communication prioritizes directness, positivity, and literal interpretation. When these two collide, chaos ensues. An American couple at Bondi Beach asked a local for restaurant recommendations. The local said, "Yeah, there's a great spot down the road. You'll love it, it's where all the tourists get food poisoning." He was joking, obviously, to anyone Australian. The Americans thanked him nervously and spent the next hour searching health department inspection records online. Working remotely from Melbourne, an American joined a local co-working space. First day, an Australian colleague walked past and said, "Nice shirt, mate. Did your nan pick that out for you?" The American froze. He'd spent $200 on that shirt. He pulled his manager aside after the meeting, voice shaking, and said he needed to file a formal workplace harassment complaint for bullying and age discrimination adjacent commentary. The manager, also Australian, looked baffled. "What? No, that means he thinks you're alright." The American couldn't process this. "He insulted my grandmother." The manager tried to explain that it was friendly banter, a sign of acceptance. The American insisted this was gaslighting and that he'd be documenting every interaction going forward. By week 2, the colleagues stopped talking to him entirely, not because they were offended, but because being too polite to someone in Australia signals you don't actually like them. At a Brisbane pub, an American exchange student joined a group of locals watching the footy. Within minutes, they started calling him Seppo, Australian slang for American, derived from septic tank, rhyming slang for yank. He didn't know this. He asked what it meant and someone said, "It's short for septic tank." The American's face dropped. "You're calling me sewage." They explained the rhyming slang thing. He wasn't convinced. He spent the next 15 minutes lecturing them about how Americans had helped Australia in World War II and that this level of disrespect violated the ANZUS Treaty. One of the Australians finally said, "Mate, if we didn't like you, we wouldn't have given you a nickname." The American demanded they call him by his real name, which immediately marked him as unable to take a joke. For the rest of the semester, they called him by his full legal name, in the most formal tones possible, which in Australian culture is the actual insult. An American woman started dating an Australian man she met through a dating app. They had a great first date until they started texting. He sent, "You're a bit of a weirdo, aren't you?" She was crushed. She screenshot the message and sent it to 7 friends for analysis. They all agreed, red flag. She responded, "I don't think this is going to work out." He was genuinely confused. To him, "You're a bit of a weirdo" was a compliment. It meant she was interesting, unique, not boring. She explained that in American dating culture, you don't insult someone you're interested in. He tried to clarify that it wasn't an insult. She sent him a link to an American relationship counselor's article about negging and emotional manipulation. He gave up. Later, he told his mates about it at the pub. One of them said, "Yeah, you've got to be careful with Americans. They take everything literally." Another one added, "It's like they can't understand that being nice all the time is actually suspicious." An American entrepreneur attended a Melbourne networking event, excited to make connections. During introductions, he launched into his elevator pitch. "I'm a 3-time founder, featured in Forbes 30 Under 30, and my current startup is disrupting the financial technology space with blockchain-based solutions that have already secured series of funding." The room went silent. One Australian in the back muttered, "Tall poppy." The American didn't hear it, but he felt the temperature drop. When an Australian entrepreneur introduced themselves next, they said, "Yeah, I've got a little tech thing going. It's probably going to fail, but we'll see." The Australian's company had actually just raised $5 million. The American couldn't understand why nobody seemed impressed by his credentials, but was asking the self-deprecating Australian tons of questions. Later, he complained to the event organizer that Australians were hostile to success and possibly engaged in socialist business practices. A group of Americans joined a corporate team in Sydney. During a team meeting, the Australian project lead said, "This project's probably going to be a disaster, but we'll give it a crack." The Americans panicked. One of them sent a message to their U.S. headquarters. "Management has no confidence in project success. Recommend immediate intervention." HR called an emergency meeting. The Australian manager was baffled. "It was a joke, mate. We're ahead of schedule." The American team couldn't reconcile this. "But you said it would be a disaster." The manager tried to explain that in Australian culture, you downplay things so you don't seem arrogant. The Americans insisted this was poor leadership communication and possibly a liability issue if stakeholders heard this kind of defeatist language. They recommended the manager take a course on projecting leadership confidence. The manager just sighed and said, "Yeah, righto. I'll get right on that." An American academic presented at a Sydney University conference. Afterwards, an Australian professor approached him and said, "That was interesting." The American beamed. "Thank you so much. I worked really hard on it." The Australian looked uncomfortable. "No, I mean, it was interesting." The American still didn't get it. Later, one of his colleagues quietly explained that interesting in Australian academic circles is code for, "I fundamentally disagreed with everything you just said." The American was devastated. He'd thought he'd made a good impression. He asked why the Australian didn't just say what he meant. His colleague explained, "Because being too direct is considered rude. They soften criticism with understatement." The American's head nearly exploded. "But I thought Australians were direct." His colleague sighed. "They are direct, but in a way that requires you to read between the lines." The Americans spent the rest of the conference terrified that every compliment was actually an insult. An American family moved to Perth for a job relocation. The father took his 10-year-old son to junior football practice. The coach, a friendly Australian bloke, greeted them with, "Day. You must be the new kid. No worries, mate, you'll be fucking great out there." The father's eyes widened. He pulled his son back protectively. "Excuse me, do not use that language around my child." The coach looked confused. "What language?" The father spelled it out. "The F word. He's 10 years old." The coach genuinely didn't understand what the problem was. "Mate, it's just a word. Doesn't mean anything." The father started filming on his phone, threatening to report the coach to whatever Australia's equivalent of Child Protective Services is. Other parents tried to explain that swearing in Australia is just part of normal speech, even around kids. The American father refused to believe this. He pulled his son from the team and later wrote a 1,500-word post on an American expat forum about how Australia has no family values and how he was considering homeschooling to protect his child from casual profanity culture. An American woman got a job at an Australian marketing agency. First day, her colleague walked in and said, "Fuck, it's hot today, isn't it?" She froze. Was this a test? Should she report this to HR? She decided to play it safe and said, I prefer not to use that kind of language in the workplace. Her colleague looked at her like she'd just announced she was from Mars. What kind of language? She lowered her voice. You know. The F word. The colleague laughed. Oh, you're one of those. From then on, everyone monitored their language around her, which in Australian culture meant they didn't really trust her. She couldn't understand why she wasn't fitting in. 6 months later, during a heated project deadline discussion, she finally let out a, "This is so fucking stressful." The entire team cheered. There we go. She's one of us now. She realized she'd been excluded for 6 months simply because she wouldn't swear. An American tourist in Tasmania asked a local for directions. The local said, "Yeah, no worries, cunt. You want to head down this road." The American's face went pale. He backed away slowly, genuinely frightened. Later, he wrote a blog post about how he'd been verbally assaulted by a hate-slurring Australian and how travelers should exercise extreme caution in Tasmania. The post included safety recommendations and a warning about Australian aggression toward tourists. An Australian reader tried to explain in the comments that cunt in Australian English is often used casually among friends and doesn't carry the same severity as in American English. The American responded, "This is exactly the kind of normalization of hate speech I'm talking about. In America, that word is one of the worst things you can call someone." He couldn't comprehend that the same word could have completely different social weight in different English-speaking cultures. He ended up putting Tasmania on a do not visit list for his American followers. An American couple hired Australian tradesmen to renovate their Sydney apartment. The electrician showed up, looked at their wiring, and said, "Yeah, this is fucked." The Americans panicked. "It's what? Can it be fixed? Do we need to move out?" The electrician looked confused. "Nah, mate, I can fix it today." The Americans were still confused. "But you just said it was unsalvageable." The electrician laughed. "Nah, fucked just means it's not great. If it was actually unsalvageable, I would have said it's completely fucked." The Americans tried to establish a clear severity scale. "So what's the difference between fucked and completely fucked?" The electrician thought about it. "Well, there's fucked, properly fucked, totally fucked, and then completely fucked. Then there's absolutely completely fucked, which is when you should probably just move." The Americans made him write this down in a numbered list so they could reference it later. He thought they were taking the piss. They weren't. An American started working at an Australian tech company. During a stand-up meeting, his Australian colleague said about a bug, "Yeah, nah, we'll probably just leave that one." The American immediately scheduled a one-on-one meeting with his manager to discuss why they were intentionally shipping broken code. The manager said, "What? No, yeah, nah means no. We're fixing it." The American was lost. But he said, "Yeah, first." The manager explained that "yeah, nah" is an Australian phrase that means no, while "nah, yeah" means yes. The American couldn't accept this. That violates basic Boolean logic. Yes and no are binary opposites. He created a spreadsheet of Australian phrases that seemed contradictory and sent it to the entire company with the subject line, "Communication inconsistencies requiring resolution." His Australian colleagues found it hilarious. They started using even more contradictory phrases around him just to watch his brain short-circuit. When someone said, "Yeah, nah, yeah, but nah," he nearly had a breakdown. An American tourist on a Gold Coast beach asked a lifeguard if it was safe to swim. The lifeguard looked at the flat, calm water and said, "Yeah, should be right. Might get eaten by a shark, but probably not today." The American's eyes widened. "Probably not? What's the percentage likelihood?" The lifeguard shrugged. "Dunno, like 99% you'll be fine." The American started pacing. "That's a 1% chance of shark attack." That's statistically significant. The lifeguard tried to backtrack. Mate, I was joking. There hasn't been a shark attack here in 20 years. The American wasn't convinced. But you said I might get eaten. The lifeguard gave up. Yeah, and you might get hit by a meteorite. Doesn't mean it's gonna happen. The American spent the next hour researching meteorite impact statistics in coastal Australia and eventually decided not to swim. He left a 1-star review of the beach, citing inadequate safety communication protocols and lifeguard who makes light of tourist mortality risks. An American woman complimented her Australian co-worker's presentation. That was amazing. You're so talented. This is going to change everything. The Australian looked uncomfortable. Yeah, nah, it was alright. Just threw some slides together. The American was hurt. Why are you minimizing my compliment? I'm trying to celebrate you. The Australian just shrugged. Later, another colleague explained that Australians deflect compliments because accepting them too enthusiastically is seen as arrogant. The American couldn't understand this. In America, when someone compliments you, you're supposed to say thank you and own it. It's confident. She decided to model this behavior. When an Australian colleague said her report was not bad, she responded, I know, right? I'm actually really proud of it. I think it's some of my best work. The entire office stopped talking. She'd committed the cardinal sin, taking herself seriously. From that moment on, she was marked as the tall poppy, and people became much more reserved around her. An American man started playing cricket with a local team in Adelaide. After his first game, an Australian teammate said, "You're shit, but you'll get better." The American was crushed. He'd thought he'd done okay. He confronted the teammate later. "Why would you say something so hurtful?" The teammate was genuinely confused. "What? I said you'd get better. That's encouraging." The American explained that in American sports culture, you build people up with positive reinforcement, not negative criticism. The teammate tried to explain that in Australian sports culture, harsh honesty is a sign of respect. It means they think you're worth coaching. The American still felt insulted. The next game, the same teammate said nothing to him at all. After the game, another player pulled him aside. "Mate, I think you hurt his feelings. He was trying to help you." The American was baffled. "I hurt his feelings? He called me shit." The player sighed. "Yeah, but when he stopped talking to you, that's when you know he's actually pissed off." An American couple attended an Australian wedding. During the speeches, the best man said, "I've known the groom for 20 years, and he's a massive dickhead." Everyone laughed. The Americans gasped. "But that's terrible. They're friends." They couldn't understand why insulting someone at their wedding was acceptable. When the groom gave his own speech and thanked the best man by saying, "Thanks, mate. You're also a dickhead," they were even more confused. Later, the Americans tried to have a serious conversation with the bride. "Are you okay?" That seemed really hostile. The bride looked at them like they were insane. "What? That's just how they show they care." The Americans left early, convinced they'd witnessed some kind of toxic friendship dynamic. They later wrote an article for an American wedding blog about warning signs of unhealthy Australian friendships, based entirely on not understanding that affectionate insults are how Australian men express emotion. Met another American in Sydney last month, their 6th month in Australia. They'd finally cracked the code. A barista handed them coffee and said, "There you go, you absolute legend." The American beamed. Later, I asked how they were adjusting. They said, "I've learned that in Australia, insults mean they like you, compliments mean they're being polite, and if someone's too nice, they definitely hate you." They paused. The hardest part was realizing that my entire communication style, the positivity, the enthusiasm, the celebrating achievements, reads as fake to Australians. They'd started downplaying everything, adding yeah, nah to their vocabulary, and most importantly, learning to take the piss. Last week, my coworker said my presentation was a bit shit. I said, yeah, but not as shit as yours. We're best mates now. Here's the thing about Australian banter culture. It's not hostile, it's not rude, and it's definitely not meant to hurt feelings. It's actually a sophisticated social code built on egalitarianism, where nobody's allowed to get too big for their boots and genuine affection is shown through playful mockery rather than hollow praise. Americans, raised in a culture of relentless positivity, literal communication, and enthusiastic self-promotion, find themselves in a linguistic minefield where everything means its opposite and the worst thing you can do is take yourself too seriously. The tragedy is watching Americans interpret Australians' most genuine expressions of warmth as attacks, and their most cutting dismissals as politeness. An Australian calling you mate while insulting your shoes means you're in. An Australian calling you by your full name and using perfect grammar means you're out. For Americans who finally understand this, Australia becomes home. For those who don't, it remains a confusing place where everyone seems angry but claims they're joking. If you're American and headed to Australia, forget everything you know about communication. Your positivity will seem fake. Your self-confidence will seem arrogant. Your literal interpretations will mark you as unable to read between the lines. Learn to take the piss, give it back, and whatever you do, don't call HR when someone calls you a dickhead. It might just be the beginning of a beautiful friendship,